As your hosts of Your Voice with the NRP, and we're here every Monday night, 8:30 to 10, to amplify your voice. We're the voice of the people. And of course, it's Monday, September 26, 2022, and September is speeding along. Next time we're here, we'll be in the month of October. With us tonight, the leadership of the Nevis Reformation Party, Dr. Janice Daniel Hodge. It is always a pleasure to have her. She's so insightful, giving us insight into the emerging leadership on Nevis. It's been a few weeks, Doc. So glad to have you once again.
Thank you, Mr. Manners. Of course, it's my pleasure to be here. As the intro would have said, amplifying the voice. And it has been a bit of time. But so much has happened during the time that since I've been here. Of course, you'd have heard from the other NRP candidates. And here tonight, not necessarily in the best frame of mind, considering what would have transpired over the weekend. There's a lot going on, but certainly we would get to it in a bit. The situation regarding Zona Hamilton, that is something that I think would resonate with the people of Nevis for a very long time, because there are lots of questions and not very many answers. Of course, we are also looking at, since the last time that I was here, we had Fiona pass through. Mm-hmm. We, of course, were spared this time, but Canada is actually seeing record-breaking impacts, and as we get into the program a bit later and we speak about what's going on at the UN, I think it was PM Mia Motley who said we are all going to be facing the impacts, and once upon a time when we can reach out and ask for assistance to deal with the impacts of hurricanes, we're recognizing that because of climate change we are seeing the mainland Canada, India, the impacts are worldwide. And these are some of the issues that we're going to have to grapple with going forward. And so, based on where we are right now, I think Nevis is at a point where we really must have focused leadership, and we must have leadership that can relate and understand what is going on locally. We must have the compassion to deal with some of the challenges that we have to deal with here, but also be able to connect into the global arena to be able to capitalize and to be a part of whatever is being discussed on that level. And so before we get into the heart of the program, I would just want to say, good night to everyone who's listening. It has been a while since I've been here. I've been getting a lot of calls. People want to know when are you coming back on? Is the campaign still on, etc. But a lot of house to house. We really have to take the time to do that. And I just want to encourage everyone who's listening to understand that so many different things to deal with. But when we get back, I really want to spend a little bit of time talking about what happened on Saturday with Zona Hamilton, and of course the rest of the matters would unfold.
Okay, and of course our prayers go out to the people, of course, in Puerto Rico, the Cayman Islands, Havana, and the western side of Cuba should be taking a beating tonight. And of course it moves into the U.S. mainland. People in Tampa, so all our folks in the diaspora, the West Indian communities, we're praying for you as you brace yourself for another hit from a hurricane. Of course, last week, exactly 1 week ago, we were celebrating our 39th anniversary of independence. Your thoughts on that? And of course, in the same week, we had Prime Minister Terence Dew making his inaugural address to the United Nations.
Certainly, and when we celebrate independence, I would have given an address and focused really on what it means to be independent, understanding what our Constitution provides to the people of Nevis with regards to being self-reliant and being able to chart our course. And one of the concerns that we have is that the opportunities and the authorities that have been granted to us really have been underutilized, and so we find ourselves in a situation where we have become so dependent not only on our sister island of St. Kitts, but also on external sources, whether it's with regards to fuel to provide electricity for us here on Nevis, whether it's with regards to the ability to pay our civil servants. I mean, Nevis, we were really on a path to being self-reliant, to be able to determine our path to sustainability based on having the NIA and the ability to create the type of ordinances that would help us to direct our development activities. And we have seen that really come to a halt, you could say, under this current CCM administration. And so when we look at independence and what independence is really about, we are proud to be independent as a nation, as a country, St. Kitts and Nevis, but based on the rights that we would have earned in the Constitution, and as we often say, blood, sweat and tears, and that is not just a cliche. That is really what would have occurred back in the 70s and early 80s in order for us to get that right and home rule after over 100 years, and to see that we are now back in a position as to where we're actually having to question the actual intent of the Constitution with regards to our ability to take certain measures as an island. And so when we look at independence, I did listen to a bit of a discourse between the mighty Baha'u'llah and Reverend Herbert, with the people of Nevis having a mixed feeling about independence. Because on one hand, yes, as a country we are independent, and as a country people will say that we are progressing. But when you start to dissect and look at the Nevis component of our country, we recognize that Nevis has really fallen way back from where we were in the 80s in terms of determining our own destiny. And so that has a bit of a mixed feeling for a number of people here on Nevis. Of course, you need to have trust and relationship building and the ability to understand different perspectives and to know that compromises must be made, in different situations. But trust is key, and I've heard that mentioned so many times by so many different leaders, because as much as we would have our individual preferences and our individual wants and needs, to the extent that we can feel that we're really in this looking at the country above self, then we can have that common bond to move forward. But when you have situations where you're concerned about the stability of the government, when you're concerned about whether or not people have self motives or it's the country that we're looking at, then it creates a bit of a challenge with regards to how we would go forward. And so, yes, the independence ceremonies, I did attend the ceremony here at Grove Park, and I was quite pleased to see the persons who were honored. I think they were well deserving. And it is for most of the persons, like higher from Brown Hill and Miss Elliott and Mr. Jones, etc. It really spoke to that level of entrepreneurship and determination, which we know Nevisians are so well known for, to want to determine our own destiny. And so when you look at the awards that were granted and the reasons for which they were granted, of course it was in keeping with the independent and the self-reliance, etc. And so that was quite pleasing. I did listen to the remarks that were given by the Prime Minister and others, and I'm sure we'll get into that in a little bit. But independence this year, it was marked by, of course, the funeral of the Queen, our former head of state, and I did indicate that, at the time of her passing, she was still our head of state, and so due respect, of course, should be granted. But we hear the talk about moving towards republic status, and if it's one thing I would really pay close attention to is certain remarks that were made with regards to how we would want to move forward as a country. When we look at inclusivity and togetherness and, trying to build bonds and bridges, these are things that we really must pay attention to as we move towards any state, whether it's constitutional reform, whether it's to a different, status. We must ensure that we're looking at the country and what is in the best interest of the country going forward, so that again we can attain those sustainability goals that we all would need in order to have long life and prosperity going forward.
Now, your father, the late Dr. Simeon Daniel, national hero, helped to shape this country. He was front and center in 1983. Now, he left public office 30 years ago. He passed 10 years ago this year. What do you think he would say if he were here? You knew him better than most. First, looking back at the Federation as a whole, and as to where Nevis is within that Federation.
What I think he would be saying, I don't think he would have expected to see the Constitution that was drafted in 1983 still around today. I think he recognized before he passed that secession, it is really something that he lived for and died wanting, but understanding that it is not because he felt that was best for Nevis that it would happen. It required that all of Nevis, or the majority of Nevis, 2/3 as a matter of fact, to vote in that way. And once you had the two political parties, you would have different views, different perspectives, and so that became a bit of a challenge. But I really think he felt and he really wanted Nevis to be able to determine its own future. He felt that based on what was done, we had the capacity to manage our own affairs, and that was clearly demonstrated in the 80s when you would have seen the foundation being laid with regards to employment opportunities to the Four Seasons Hotel. You look at our banking, the Bank of Nevis was developed around that time. We had our own sixth form college, our agricultural sector, and so you could see that there was a purpose to everything that was being done, understanding that if Nevis is going to be independent, we must be able to take care of ourselves. And so, you saw electricity, you saw water supply, and all of these things were being done because the feeling that he had and the majority of the NRP at the time was that Nevis would be better off. Of course, we look at the passage of time, and there are some people who would say, well, that was back then, and we've had a good relationship, and just most recently we would have heard the Premier saying that this is the best relationship that we've had with the government of St. Kitts. But unfortunately, when you have people in positions, decision-making positions, and the country or Nevis is not really the priority, then you find decisions are being made that are not necessarily in the best interest of Nevis and not necessarily in the best interest of the country. And I think that is where we have found ourselves at this point in time. And I think my father would be disappointed, especially with the leadership of the country right now, because I think quite a number of people would have had confidence that Premier Mark Brantley would have delivered for Nevis. I know for certain that he did indicate that he was going to pursue secession, and that is something that my father really believed in, and so he would have supported Mark at the time, and even asked others to support, because he felt that that was his opportunity to realize secession. But not only was secession not delivered, and we understand the complexity of that. I don't think anybody would hold that against against the current premier. But definitely in terms of where Nevis is right now, going backwards and fully dependent on St. Kitts to pay civil servants, not having any new foreign direct investment, so to speak, and even having the Charlestown Accord there to be able to legislate certain matters, because we understand the history between the two islands, and we know, depending on who is at the table at any particular time, the relationship can change just like that. And so, being legally trained and of a legal mind, and understanding what we wanted for Nevis, and not just what we wanted, but the promises that were made to the people of Nevis, that if given the opportunity to represent, not just with 2 but with 3 representatives in the National Assembly, that Nevis would be better off. And unfortunately, we now recognize, like most people, that you took a chance with CCM government, took a chance with Mark Brantley, and we realize that Nevis is now going backwards, and they now have 3 seats, and they are now in the opposition, not around the decision-making table. And so we know there are a number of factors, that are dealt with at the national level, such as national security and certain imports, etc. That it really would be preferred if Nevis had representation around the table, so that the perspectives of Nevis can be looked at. We know that the cost of living and the cost of doing business in Nevis is higher than it is in St. Kitts, and notwithstanding the equity with regards to the distribution of national resources, there's still a lot of disparities between St. Kitts and Nevis. So if you're looking at certain things from a St. Kitts perspective only, such as, school meals program and different things where there is no cost to the people in St. Kitts, but there's a cost to the people in Nevis, all of these must be looked at. And so, when programs are being put in place, you need someone from Nevis at least to indicate or to negotiate on behalf of the people of Nevis, because when you look at healthcare, just recently the Prime Minister would have indicated that college tuition, the cost, there's no cost for attending CFBC. The students in Nevis will still have to ferry over. Is that being looked at? And so the people of Nevis, not that it is intentional, because I am certain that when the Prime Minister said that the cost of college would be free, that is at CFBC, I'm anticipating that the same thing applies to Nevis Sixth Form College. And for those students who cannot get their classes here and must go over to St. Kitts, I am hoping that the NIA would recognize what it is to make education accessible and affordable to all, and make the necessary interventions to ensure that the students from Nevis are not disadvantaged, so to speak. And so, when you look at independence, and in many ways we're still dependent, and yes, we don't expect that we would be self-sufficient and self-serving. As I would have said before, no man is an island, and we must collaborate and work with each other. But to the extent that we have what is required to determine our destiny, it's always better when you can bargain with options, when you can negotiate, knowing that you're not going to have to come back next week and beg to pay your civil servants. When you know that you have certain things in place and you're negotiating for greater advancement or greater prosperity, then you're in a much better position. And so right now, I think we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do in Nevis. As we look at the way going forward, we would want to ensure that what is best for the country is best for Nevis, and so the necessary dialogue must take place. It cannot be one-sided, and as we look at what has been transpiring and where we are with regards to the status of Nevis based on the Ocean Reef Resort's judgment. That is something that the people of Nevis really must address in a very serious way. Before now, I think it was an understanding that Nevis has certain rights, and with these rights you have certain it's almost it has to go hand in hand. How can you have the right to develop? How can you have the right to draft your own legislation, but not have the right to enter into certain contracts and etc. And so these things really have to be looked at carefully. I'm not legally trained, but I am not afraid to ask for help from those who have the expertise in the necessary area, and so this is something that we cannot take lightly. And I feel like I've been talking for a long time. I could keep talking on and on and on, but I would pause here and allow you to interject.
If I'm not mistaken, the Attorney General, Garth Wilkin, said he met with the people in the legal department here for the NIA, I think it was last Thursday. There has been some indication from the Prime Minister that there will be a committee set up to begin to look at the Constitution. Do you know where that is? Has it started?
Well, it's interesting that you raised that, because there was a post made by the Attorney General indicating that he had the first formal meeting of the Joint Constitutional Reform Committee, and I question that, because I can imagine, based on my understanding of these things, that invitations would be sent to various stakeholders. It's not just a government matter. You are going to have referenda, and you would need to ensure that you have the country's buy-in, not just St. Kitts and not just a legal matter. And so it raised my eyebrows a bit when that was reported that the first formal meeting was had, because I think you really must include their lawyers in Nevis other than those in the NIA. And in fact, I think the lawyers in the NIA are the ones who would have presented the case regarding NIA not being juridical, as the saying goes. And so we have to be careful if we really want to proceed based on the I would say the wishes of the Prime Minister, where all are included. Then I would have to question whether or not that could have been a formal meeting, or whether or not it was just an introductory meeting. But even further in the remarks, the AG indicated that certain agreements were made with regards to the status of the NIA. And so I would just want us to ensure that we are really trying to look at things, in a holistic way, and not just trying to rush, because when you rush to get things done, we're going to end up with more problems. And I really think that St. Kitts and Nevis, we're mature. We're a mature country, and I think with the right people around the right tables, that we can move forward in quite a cordial and a mutually beneficial way. And so I would just I have made some efforts to have some meetings. I'm scheduled to have some meetings next week, because of course in RP we cannot sit back and see these things happening. And some of our supporters they feel that we're a bit quiet right now, But right now there's a lot going on that we really must pay attention to, and we have to really establish our position as a party on what is happening right now. And so, it is not a straight line. We cannot be 100% in campaign mode all the time. We must ensure that the playing field can be as level as it can be, and that there's as much inclusivity. Because when you look at where Nevis is right now, when you look at the results of the last election, you will see clearly that the people, the people of Nevis, you have quite a large amount on one side, and you have quite a large amount on the other side. And so all of us, we should have an opportunity for our voices to be heard. And so any joint commission with regards to constitutional reform, etc., that is going to come back to the people to vote, we will want to ensure that we do not have to repeat the process. We do not have to go through something twice. Let us make sure that all of the necessary stakeholders are included, are part of the committee. And so when we speak to our supporters, then everybody can be comfortable that, yes, compromises may have had to be made, but we then can articulate why certain compromises were made or not made, or why we would want to challenge certain issues. And so, yes, that is the talk, and but NRP is alive and well, and it's our intention to be included in those sorts of committees, and that is the commitment that the Prime Minister would have made. So we just want to ensure that his wishes are really fulfilled with regards to that aspect of it.
Now, you referred to the passing of Queen Elizabeth II. That was on September 8th, so it's been 18 days. And we're in a bit of a constitutional limbo. There are three words the BBC used, and I followed their commentary of the Queen's passing very closely. I can't recall the three words, but they said it was seamless, highlighted the seamless transition from one monarch to the next. Here in our country, for instance, we've got this. In my inquisitive mind, I'm asking, how much longer? She's no longer the monarch. As long as we remain a constitutional monarchy, then it would be King Charles. Are we missing a beat from our government in St. Kitts, for instance? Should an Attorney General, for instance, come to us and tell us where we are? What's the process to get past this? This is all we have known, and it's probably no easy matter. But shouldn't we be enlightened? All we've known all our lives is Queen Elizabeth II, but she's gone. She's no longer here. And of course, a lot of us wish that this will give us a moment for broader constitutional reform. We've talked about it, and you said you don't want to see this rushed. Should the dialogue begin from our leadership to begin to tell us where we want to get, how we intend to get there?
Well, certainly the dialogue should begin. It has started. It must start somewhere. It's how it is rolled out that is the concern. And I think the people of Nevis would be paying very close attention, because we know that under the current constitution we have certain exclusive rights to how the affairs of Nevis are managed. And so if, for example, we're moving towards a republic status, then clearly it must be articulated, or it must be negotiated what the relationship between St. Kitts and Nevis is going to be. The constitution would have to be, it would be a new constitution, because this constitution that we have is based on, as you mentioned, the monarchy. If we go to republic status, then is it still going to be constitutional reform, or is it going to be a new constitution? I am not learned in these constitutional matters per se. What I do know is that Section 102 of the current constitution does provide Nevis with certain rights, and unfortunately they have been underutilized. We have not been able to capitalize on those rights, and we would want to ensure that as much as what is in the best interest of the country, we must understand what we have now. Like I said, after 100 years of home rule, and we regained that in 1983, and we must really look at these issues. And so, there must be the period of education where everyone can understand what we have now, what we may want to work towards, what are the implications, and how any disparities may be addressed. And so when we just speak simply of constitutional reform, but on the other hand we speak of going to a republic status, there are a lot of questions. A lot of questions are raised, and if they are not adequately addressed, they can create some confusion. And I think we're trying to move away from confusion. I think we really want, I know that NRP and as leader of NRP, we would want what is in the best interest of Nevis and what's in the best interest of our country. We're dependent on each other in certain ways. We don't want to be reliant on things. But, we're sister islands. We have our linkages, etc. And so we do not want it to get to be a point where, because of the lack of information, people begin to formulate different ideas, and you get to confusion. So I think to the extent that the AG is speaking about constitutional reform, how does that fit with the pursuit of republic status? And these are things that should be put out early, because we know we have certain politicians, especially here in Nevis, they like to say things that are not true. And when they start to stick in people's minds, then it's very difficult to remove those. And we know that we do not want any mash-up, so to speak, again. We want to be able to get back to where we can enjoy harmonious living here on Nevis, where we can be comfortable knowing that your elected representatives are looking out for the best interest of Nevis, and not trying to, if you cannot get your way, then you create this confusion. We do not want that. And so I think from listening to the Prime Minister, I feel that he would want us to be able to proceed in an orderly manner. And I think that can be best accomplished when, like I said, everyone has a seat around the table. Not in cabinet, because we can see that they already rejected the CCM. But definitely when you form committees and task force, and you're going to need to have the buy-in of stakeholders from different areas, the businesses, the hotels, then the task force must include the necessary representatives from across the board. And so I feel that we would get to that point. But yes, that the statement that was put out by the AG did raise some eyebrows, and I trust that I think that the was not really a formal meeting. I think it was a preliminary meeting to maybe discuss some ideas as to the approach to include all of the stakeholders. Yes.
Now, of course, in recent times it has been Prime Minister Mayor Motley of Barbados who moved Barbados to a republic November 30th last year, and of course more seasoned Caribbean leaders in Andrew Holness and Dominique in Jamaica, Gaston Brown in Antigua, and of course newly elected Prime Minister, or installed Prime Minister, Dr. Jew. He's gotten on board clearly with an eye on the 40th anniversary. You're suggesting that we need to proceed methodically and slowly. Realistically, what would you like to see? What would be your template? I know it's a hard question, but you obviously want better for Nevis and better for St. Kitts. what would you advocate?
I would advocate for an all-inclusive approach. This is where you would need to establish a committee to deal with the constitutional matters, so to speak, and you have a good representation from the various stakeholder groups, whether they're political stakeholders, business stakeholders, NGOs, CSOs, the Christian society. You must try to be as inclusive as possible to avoid pushback at the back end. And so I've participated in a number of task force groups before. I understand how they work. Sometimes they can get a bit large and a bit cumbersome, but if that is what is required, I think with the right structure and a good framework, then you can accomplish what is set out, because not everyone is going to understand all of the issues at the same level. But if you feel that you are represented and you can trust the person who is representing you, then it would be then the responsibility of those members of the task force to engage the wider population, so that at the end you can have seamless, maybe you can say seamless, but as seamless as possible. And so I'm saying, and ensure that the political parties are included, the various stakeholder groups, and then you have the first formal meeting to determine the path and the issues. And for me, like I say, I may not even be the one that is on the task force because of what is being discussed, but I am quite certain that within my party we have persons who are more skilled than I am on constitutional matters. I do know what I want for Nevis and I do know how to lead the course, but then you must be able to ensure that you have the best representation, and once somebody is representing the party, then it would be based on what the party sits down and decide and want to discuss at that particular point in time. So there's something, change must happen. We say in NRP, change must come. Mm-hmm. And so we have to be able to either adjust to the change or we create the change that we want to see. Right now we're looking at constitutional matters, we're looking at the republic status, and these are things that are dealt with by the National Assembly. So definitely we must be able to adjust and respond and be included in the discussions regarding those matters.
Prime Minister Terence Dew, I guess you're back home now after your presentation at the 77th sitting of the United Nations General Assembly, and of course over the weekend several engagements with the diaspora. They must be involved in all that we do. And of course, Attorney General Garth Wilkin, I hope you're listening. Here you've got a template as we try to move the two countries, the sister islands and Paradise, St. Kitts and Nevis, forward. We'll take a break, and then when we're back, your calls are included, and we'll also discuss some matters at the local level.
Your voice, your voice, your voice with the NRP. This and every Monday, 8:30 to 10 p.m. Join host Stephen Semanas and the NRP candidates as they amplify your voice.
And of course, always the numbers to reach us: 469-1616, 469-1700. We have discussed matters of national interest, so whether you're on Nevis or St. Kitts, give us a call, get engaged as we try to move our Twin Island Federation forward. Now, Dr. Daniel, you said earlier that a matter which occurred over the weekend have left you more than a little peeved. Can you tell our listeners more about that?
Well, yes. As you may know, this past weekend it was the weekend for International Coastal Cleanup, and so across the island you had different groups, taking part. I was with my group, Newcastle Bay Foundation. We usually clean up the Newcastle Bay at that time, and I received a phone call that the body of Zona Hamilton was found, and I left what I was doing. I rushed to the area where people were gathered, and the stories that I was hearing, I just could not believe. There were stories that Zona was in the hospital. We know that she, has some mental issues, and but she's not so much challenged that she cannot express some of her concerns, and she felt like she was people making fun of her, so to speak, but for whatever the reason was, it appears that she would have left the hospital, and up to when she was found, I am not going to repeat all of the stories that I would have heard, but I am expecting that by now the family, the people of Nevis, would have heard some official statement, even if it is to say that an investigation is ongoing. But certain decisions were taken on Saturday, and we can't be certain if those were the right decisions, and it just takes me back as to really who is in charge, and why in a situation such as this. We must go back to the hospital itself, how she was able to leave the hospital, and so an investigation must be done there. Then you have the outside security, and so we don't know if an investigation was done, is being done, will be done. Because of the circumstances, it appears that she had to be buried right away. Would there be any provision for an autopsy? I mean, we can't just assume that because she was found in a certain location, a certain position, what the cause of death was. And so this disregard for the family that is left to grieve, I would have expected that by now we could have heard an official statement, whether it's from the hospital, the minister with responsibility for the hospital, somebody to say we recognize that something unfortunate occurred. We're doing all that we can to try to get to the bottom of this. We have been in touch with the family, and we would update you, and we're looking at certain measures to ensure that something like this does not happen again. Something to that effect. But I have been listening, and I have not heard. Now, we must be concerned about this, because here is someone who was mentally challenged, for lack of a better way of putting it. And just to imagine that she could leave, who knows what could have happened, for example, in the hospital, if there wasn't any supervision, because it appears there wasn't supervision why she was able to leave. Who knows what could have happened if she was on medication and she came out and she encountered a situation. And so the biggest concern for me is that where is the responsibility? And it seems to me more and more we speak about it with regards to the actions of the NIA with certain development projects, etc. But it seems like it's a systemic situation where there is no need. It seems as if there is no need to inform the public of what is happening. And this is something that I feel the family must be rather concerned about, and even if there was a personal, reach out to the family, the public wants to know what is happening. Zona was not the only person in the hospital. There are other family members in the hospital. They would want to know where did the breach occur and what has been put in place. Suppose, for example, you had a family member in the hospital. Are you assured in any way that if they woke up and started sleepwalking or something like that, that they would not end up in a similar situation? And so, give some assurance to the public that we recognize this is not something that routinely happens, but we have done A, B, and C to ensure that it would not happen again. And I'm appalled to recognize that up to now we have not heard such a statement given. Like I said, we recognize that this is what is happening, and so when we say that this government is out of touch, it's out of touch on a number of different fronts, and we really deserve better. We really deserve better. We understand that the hospital may have some challenges, but somebody ought to have come and reassured the family, reassured the public, especially those who have loved ones in the hospital right now, that such an incident would not happen again because of these matters. And so I take this moment to extend heartfelt condolences to the family. I know the family well. My father was from Barnesgate, his family, my family, and Zona is someone that even if she is not your blood family, I wouldn't say everyone, but a number of persons know her, because she would always stop and have a conversation, and so I share the family's grief at this point in time, and I just want to say that we're asking for the NIA to do better, say something. A similar situation with the young man who was shot, and my colleague JD would have made an announcement regarding the need to cut down and to avoid gun violence and any sort of violence. But where is the appeal from the government? It's as if they've given up, they don't care. It's like people do whatever they want to do. But when you elect people to represent you, then you'd expect them to get to the bottom of issues and to try to provide some solutions so that we don't encounter unfortunate situations going forward. And so I just want to say that we really expect better, we deserve better, and the NIA really should address the people of Nevis. People are grieving, and when things just allowed to go unexplained, then what becomes of our society? What is our level of expectation with regards to the normal functioning of our society? And I feel that we have really gone away, and as the Premier would have said, they have lost their way. They're out of touch in so many different ways, that a situation as grievous as what would have happened with Zona, that they have not found it necessary to take the time to reach out to the public. The young man got shot. It's as if no big deal. These things cannot become commonplace. They're not comforting to our society, and we cannot just sit back and allow them. Share some grief with the public. Let the public know that this, we're remorseful, and we're trying to do what we can to maintain a level of stability and understanding. And so I just wanted to make mention of that situation and let the family know that we do care, and those family members who are in the hospital, we are hoping, even if they had not said it, that they would have taken some measures or put some new measures in place to prevent something like what happened to Zona from happening again.
Well, two things about that story jumped out at me. I first saw it on social media, and the time given that she walked out of the hospital at 1 a.m., if I remember correctly, on Wednesday. And then on Saturday morning, of course, rumors started circulating that her body had been found. When I heard where the body was found, it's about 400 yards away from the hospital. I don't know if that is correct because I haven't heard it from any official source. So it's not like Zona wandered off into the wilderness, went up to Hamilton or something like that. She was in the vicinity. I didn't hear of any search parties. Maybe they were on. But I was shocked on Saturday morning. I picked up my phone and a funeral is going on. The same thing jumped out at me. Had there been any analysis? Had there been a post-mortem? It seemed quick to me, but of course I was not privy to the body and know what state of decomposition it is. But the whole thing, it goes down badly. The people of Nevis cannot be happy about that, and as you say, the family must be really hurting. I was happy to see a number of ministers turn out to the funeral, because, as one minister said, she went to every church. Mm-hmm. She faithfully went to the church up by Hosford's, but we know she liked walking a lot, and she would wander into different churches. So at least she got a very decent send-off. But those two incidents, as you said, the government has to show greater compassion. Not good. Now, you had begin to talk earlier about the ocean reef, and not many Nevisians are privy to what that entails. Tell us about that.
Well, again, it's a matter with regards to the Ocean Reef Resort. Was a hotel development proposed over at the Herbert's Beach area, and I cannot get into all of the specifics, but at the end of the day, a judgment, a case was filed against the NIA, and apparently, based on my readings, it was served to someone whom the NIA determined was not the appropriate person for it to be, filed to. And so, but before that, the case was filed, and the NIA did not attend, and so the judge would have made an award to Ocean Reef Resort. I think it was somewhere in the area of $79 million dollars. And then I guess that's when the NIA woke up and said, well, you file it to the secretary. That is not the correct person to file it to. And so they filed an appeal indicating that the NIA was not the right person to file, and so the judge should overturn the judgment for the $79 million. And I guess in the analysis of what was submitted by Ocean Reef Resort and what was submitted by the NIA, the judge sided with the NIA that the NIA was not the entity. It's not juridical, so to speak, which takes us again back to the same constitution and what was intended. But I I am not a lawyer. I'm not legally trained, but what I know is that there are now questions regarding what the NIA can and cannot do without enjoining the Attorney General. And we know the Attorney General sits in St. Kitts. And so this is a situation where one can consider whether or not the NIA can enter into certain contracts without getting the AG involved. And if that is the case, that the NIA must include the AG, then you question, are we going forwards as an island or are we going backwards? And while one may say that the Constitution can be interpreted in different ways by different judges, and whether or not it's going to be appealed, it just seems to me that here this NIA, they win but they still lose. And so they would have won the judgment that the NIA was not the entity to be served. But then look at what that means when one interprets that ruling. And the similar situation, they would have won 3 seats in the last federal election, this most recent. But what does that mean for the people of Nevis? We still do not have representation. And so one must really question if the actions of the CCM government is really in the best interest of the people of Nevis. Because you cannot tell me that, for example, having the Charleston Accord, and I keep going back to it. Some of my colleagues will say that is dead, that is done. But never before did you have such an instrument drafted and signed by the then Premier of Nevis, the Prime Minister of St. Kitts, and the leader of PAM, setting out how they would go about trying to reach closer to that desired relationship between St. Kitts and Nevis. And the Premier and the CCM representatives sat there for 7 years and did not legislate, did not draft the necessary bills. And so when we speak now about possible republic status and possible constitutional reform, we must question whether or not the best interest of Nevis will be best served under a CCM government or an NRP, NIA. And history would indicate that NRP has always had the best interest of NIA, and I would say the best interest of the country, because never did you see NRP form the federal government and come out empty-handed. They may not get all that they wanted, but you would have had the necessary legal instruments in place to see Nevis move forward much better. And so the outcome of the Ocean Reef Resort, that judgment, it now raises questions about the legal status of the NIA. And these are matters that must be addressed. And my colleague, Honorable Cleo Stapleton Simmons, when she was here the last time, spoke about, some housekeeping matters that that ought to be done. And I think more so for the people of Nevis, we must really understand how we would want to see our future play out. And we've said it before, and I'll say it again, that Nevis is really at a crossroads with regards to what has been put in place and what is likely to happen if we do not have the proper care and attention.
We've got a caller on the line. Good evening, caller. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening, Mr. Manuel.
Hi, good evening. Could you raise your voice, please?
Good evening, Mr. Manuel.
Hi,
Good evening,
I'm
Madam
hearing you.
President.
Hello?
Mr. Manuel.
Yes, go right ahead, caller.
Okay. Question. As Madam President talking about this court case. You know, the last election, those on the other side said they were fighting for Navy space here. Let's say they had received the 1.5 billion which they said was Navy space here. Given the situation now and the judgment, if, let's say, I am to take the government to court, and you know the Attorney General have to get involved, I have to sue the Attorney General. If I was to do that, who will pay the money if I win my case? I'll listen after you.
Thank you for that. Putting you on a legal footing.
Well, and that I am not prepared to respond to, and that is why when we say that this NIA is silent on so many matters that are really critical to the way that people are able to move forward, we have not heard from the Premier any position regarding that ruling and what that means to the NIA and how we're operating.
Well, he did say last Wednesday evening, and I think I saw pictures to that effect, that his legal advisor had met with the Attorney General, and he said basically they'll take it all the way to the Privy Council. I think I'm not mistaken in that regard.
So I missed that.
Last Wednesday evening.
So who would take it to the Privy Council? Who would take what to the Privy Council?
Well, he said they are working out between the Attorney General's office and the legal advisor's office on Nevis the machinations. It's clearly not clear to even them. And so they're seeking clarity on the matter. But he did say they're prepared to go all the way to the Privy Council. As to how they're going to go about that, I'm not any clearer than you are.
And where was that presented?
On the mark, right here.
I mean, you know, on the mark is on the mark. You address the people. You have a press conference, and
well, he did say he most likely won't have a press conference because of the way September was. Of course, he was away on 1 week personal leave, and he's now again away on another personal leave from Sunday to Sunday. So he has skipped out of accounting in September because it only has 30 days and independence is in it.
Well, and so you see, in the absence of information, people are confused. I am sure there are a number of lawyers out there who are probably, looking at cases that they have before them and, must figure out, how do they maneuver through this. But, in a situation like that, at least you'd expect, a public announcement, not on a radio show, because a number of persons really are turned off by that show. But you have a public announcement regarding this matter, and this is where the NIA is. This is what we're planning to do, and we hope to be able to follow up with you by such and such a time. In the meantime, this is what you do. Like I said, I'm not legally trained, but I do have friends who are attorneys, and there is some level of confusion as to, going forward. There's question about whether or not, the AG's office is going to have to be involved in negotiations, because if they have to bear the brunt of whatever the outcome is, are they prepared to just join, on paper and not be involved? And then how does that get into having exclusive rights to do certain things? And so, I cannot answer the question that the caller asked, but I do hope that the NIA, the Premier, would present something, have a conversation with the people, not on his radio show, because people see that now as a political platform, And the people of Nevis must be addressed. Here's a judgment, and it brings into question the legality of the NIA. I mean, there must be something that can be presented to the public so that we can have some expectation as to what would ensue, what time frame and that sort of thing. So kind of just ignore these matters, and then that continues to erode the confidence. Imagine if you had investors out there. I mean, there are a few who I'm talking to, hoping that they'll be able to come on stream. But imagine investors out there who are privy to this court ruling, and what is the situation? Should I just go to and negotiate and sink it? So because you're going to have to include them anyway, take some time. Take some time. And you see, we're finding ourselves with more and more perplexing situations under this CCM administration. And I say it over and over again. It cannot be that the best interest of Nevis and the people of Nevis is at the core of these decisions when they're being made, because surely we must recognize that now we would have taken several steps forward on the NRP prior, and now we've taken several steps backwards. And this is not the position that I think the people of Nevis would want going into a republic, going into discussions about that. What where does that put Nevis?
Mm-hmm.
So
now, just for clarity, you mentioned Ocean Reef. The location, is it Herbert's Beach?
yes,
I did hear him say that the government acquired it, and that he would ever be eternally grateful to his deputy, Alexis Jeffers, who spearheaded that project. So is the acquisition the genesis of this problem?
there are a number of issues as far as I understand it. I do not want to have to defend myself in court, but I can tell you there are two issues. One, I think, had to do with the time of the agreement that was had between Ocean Reef and the original owner, Mr. Foster. There were some issues with regards to the design of the development. There was some request for about an acre of land to be set aside, and so between, of course, you have your financial negotiations and you have your design, negotiations, etc. But how did the NIA get involved when this was supposed to be a transaction between a prospective developer and a landowner? And so I would not venture to explain how the NIA got involved in that, and why the Deputy Premier saw it necessary to acquire property and not have the resources to develop that property. And when we look at what could have, let's say you had a government that provided the necessary support to facilitate development in Nevis, then imagine you could have had a hotel development at Herbert's Beach, employing people and bringing more foreign revenues into Nevis. But when, like I said, when you get distracted and you make decisions that is not in the best interest of Nevis and of the country, then you end up with these situations. You end up in court for this, you end up in court for that, and the Candy Resort ended up in court. I mean, why so much litigation? If you understand one of your objectives as a government is to create employment opportunities for your people, you would try your best to accommodate development, not have them ending up in court and then They just sit and rot and not able to employ. And so you win the H Strip Candy Resort case, and so who did that benefit? The buildings are there in abandoned, nobody employed. Ocean Reef Resort, they won the judgment, but is there any development, anybody employed? And so we must look at what's really behind this government. There are other development. Now the developments that go through, we see the Apsara Science and Technology Park. That is going ahead leaps and bounds. But the public doesn't know anything about it. The public doesn't know. And so this all ties into why are there so many secrets? Is it a matter of, well we know the level of governance is at an all-time low. There's no transparency in anything. But it just seems that there are secret, I don't want to say secret D's if I but here is this project moving forward, and the public knows nothing about it. It's a project on the CBI. How many passports? It's a project. The land was bought from Housing and Land Development Corporation, but the public knows nothing about it. How many jobs can the public expect would be offered to the people of Nevis? We know that they have a tendency. We saw with the Penny's Park project. It was very difficult for the people of Nevis to get jobs during the construction phase there. And so we're looking at this project, and is it going to be beneficial to the community of St. James's, to the people of Nevis? What exactly can we expect from that development? And so this sense of secrecy. The other project, again, under a cloud of secrecy, was the Atlantic View over at Cocktheat, the Spencer Brand project, and so there's just no transparency. And so when you look across the entire spectrum of what goes on in CCM, it's either one, they think people don't deserve to know what's going on. You elect people to represent you, but they're not going to tell you what they're doing for you. And that is not acceptable. That is not the way that we know government is supposed to operate. People are supposed to be involved, participate. You have public review process. Just update people, let them know what's going on. The most I've heard about the Apsara is that it's supposed to be able to attract from Hong Kong single and small and medium-sized businesses, but we don't know anything else. And so transparency.
It's a big problem.
If transparency is the problem, and when we look across, from what's happening at the hospital, why no report? Why is that kept a secret, so to speak? You look at the development, you look at everything, and you just see this glaring void when it comes to information. The matter that we looked at the other day with regards to the integrity in public life, we see that ordinance was amended but has no teeth. We look at the Freedom of Information Act, but there's an interesting issue that now comes up, because we know that there's the Integrity in Public Life Act, and so these ordinances that have been passed by the NIA, we know that if there's a conflict between the act and the ordinance, then the act
takes prominence.
And so it'll be interesting to see when the AG is through with the investigations, I guess, what would come out of all of these situations. The situation with the Atlantic View I don't think it's Atlantic View. Is it Atlantic View?
The name eludes me at the moment.
Yeah, but the issue with that is that a minister of government ought not get elected with assets totaling, let's say, for example, $5 million. And when you're ready to leave, you have assets totaling $120 million. That is wrong. That is wrong. That is enriching oneself, and that is not what the public office is there for. Is to help others. Is to help people, and these things happen, and they only came to light because the federal election was about to happen, and so we continue to question why we're not getting investors. And when you look at the lack of transparency, when you look at which projects are being moved forward, there are a whole number of reasons why we would say that Nevis is not developing the way that it ought to at this point in time.
Okay, we've got another 12 minutes. You've got to talk fuel surcharge. You made it happen.
Well, the fuel surcharge, the question that I have about that, I know that it could have been done. We received 400 million plus in revenue that really should have been gravy, so to speak. Now we know that they've been using it to pay civil servants because they have not generated any economy. But the question that I ask is that, in my mind, I know where the money was going to come from to cover the surcharge once NRP was elected. Now we hear the Premier speak about, he spoke to the folks at NEVLEC and going to give them an additional $500,000, and that should help to take care. But so he just had it in his pocket? I mean, usually in a situation like that, either we're going to end up paying for it in the long run by some tax from somewhere, or he's going to tell the civil servants, well, I used it to pay the surcharge, so I can't give you your 5%. But when you're making that type of a change or allocation, what I am accustomed to hear is that, well, this was not budgeted for. Obviously it was not. So we're not going to do this project, and we're going to use this money to help reduce the cost of the fuel surcharge. But when I reflect on the reason why we had the falling out, the mashing up, so to speak, we can recall the Prime Minister then saying that Mark said he wanted more money to run an election, and money was passing as if there's no procedure, there's no standard way to move monies, etc. Now I was expecting that you may hear, well, maybe the concert is not going to happen again, and so I prefer for you guys to have the money in your pocket than for you all to have one night of fun. Based on the situation, people would understand. But I understand the concert is still going to happen. Everything is still going on as planned. So I'm only asking for transparency.
Mm-hmm.
What is being set back on the back burner in order to cover the surcharge? And there must be accountability, because we said it over and over again, the projects that we see in Nevis cannot account for the amount of monies that came through Nevis. So where is the money? And as my colleague would say, Where the money gone? I am still at a loss for how we can have such poor governance, and the people of Nevis would expect for Nevis to be progressive. You must give account. You have a budget, you operate by the budget. The Premier will be the first to say you should not live
Above your means.
above your means. Right? You should not you should not live a lifestyle based on the expenses, something to that effect. You should live within your means. Whatever you work for, that is what you should operate. But we have a serious concern, we have a serious problem. And I have to say that we are seeing where the NIA has now been brought into question. Monies have been sent over to Nevis, and we cannot give account for it. Social programs are lacking. We're seeing disparity in programs in St. Kitts compared to Nevis, and I would like to say to the people of Nevis that we were once on a path to peace, progress, and prosperity. Nevis was prospering. The people in Nevis were living good lives. They could have enjoyed living. There were employment opportunities. You had Four Seasons, you had Brown Communications, you had the various hotels. What we're seeing now, loss of employment opportunities, underutilization of the powers that we have under the NIA, squandered opportunities to have better relations between St. Kitts and Nevis. And based on the track record of NRP, based on the candidates that we have for NRP at this point in time, start with number 1, constituency number 1, Ms. J.D. Keynes. In constituency number 2, Dr. Patricia Bartlett. In number 3, Mr. Rohan Isles. In number 5, our sole parliamentarian at this point, Honorable Cleon Stapleton Simmons, and myself as leader of the party in constituency number 4. People of Nevis, for this election, we must act as if this could very well be the last time that we vote for the representation for Nevis and the people of Nevis and for the well-being of the people of Nevis. I do not think, based on what we are seeing going on around us, I do not think that we can take another chance with this CCM. I do not think that we can depend on them. We gave them a simple Charleston Accord to negotiate and legislate, and they failed us miserably. Simple project at Herbert's Beach end up bringing the NIA into question. And is this really how we want to live? In confusion, divisiveness. We say it is a time for change. Change must happen, and change must come if we are going to set Nevis and St. Kitts and Nevis. Because if you cannot have a country and one half of the country not doing well or being disgruntled, and you must have effective relations and effective negotiations in order to ensure that the country as a whole is doing well. And so I'm pleading to the people of Nevis, do not take a chance again. This is a time to ensure that Nevis has the representation that would be looking out for the best interests of Nevis and the people of Nevis.
And that ocean reef, as you said earlier, has put us into legal limbo, legal jeopardy.
And silence.
Could be in the range of 79 million and counting. Not good. The Premier seems to be holding out as a beacon of hope to your funnel. Said by January we'll be in a good position to move forward. You optimistic about that?
I'm optimistic about geothermal, not with the Premier leading the charge on that. I would have said some time ago that since 2017, the Caribbean Development Bank launched a region-wide project to explore geothermal, where we are and what is required. Back then, the documents would have indicated about $92 million to deliver geothermal to Nevis. And this is now 2022. During that time, there was no talk about a solar facility on St. Kitts. A solar facility talks emerged. It's on its way to being delivered. I can't understand why all of the shenanigans with geothermal, because if you know, this is what is going to be the gateway to prosperity for Nevis and St. Kitts and Nevis. One time you hear in negotiations with NREI, next time you're in negotiations with someone else, next time we're nearing the end, next time we're getting close. And so I am hopeful that we can advance geothermal, but geothermal development is not something that is going to happen overnight. You need to be steadfast. You need to allocate your resources for specific costs. You need to have your priorities in order. And I think that is what CCM lacked. Where was the priority? There was no priority. There was no focus. And so you found monies being spent in ways that were not sustainable. And where the money should have been spent to make Nevis more sustainable, it was not spent. And so it's like the guy calling Wolf, you know, maybe because I hear him speaking about CDB now. CDB is who he should have been talking with at the very beginning. And so if he's talking about CDB now, maybe, again, I spoke about the surcharge and we saw the surcharge. I spoke about CDB, I think it was probably the first or second show that we had here. And understanding that is the Caribbean Development Bank. They have their objectives and their vision of how they would want to contribute to the sustainable development of the OECS. What we have to do is align our priorities with their priorities, and we can make it happen. That was not happening. Maybe they said pressure bust pipe. So maybe he is now forced to align his priorities with CDB. And with CDB involved, I imagine that we may see something with geothermal, but it's been a long time. Should have happened. How many persons would have lost hundreds, thousands of dollars with the surcharge? That did not have to happen. So,
Well, January is close to March, the outer limit for the CCM administration. It's been a quiet night as we've listened to the quiet storm. The leader of the NRP, Dr. Janice Daniel Hodge, laying it out as only she can to move Nevis and St. Kitts and Nevis forward. It was nice having you.
as usual, it's nice being here. Thank you.
Your voice, your voice, your voice with the NRP. This and every Monday, 8:30 to 10 p.m. Join host Stephen Semanas and the NRP candidates as they amplify your voice.
The views and opinions expressed on the preceding program were solely those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Nevis Broadcasting Company Limited or its